Okay, well, first and foremost, my dissertation has been handed in. Hooray! Which has led me to kind of want to evaluate what's going on in my practice, which is actually coming along better than I thought it was. At first I thought I'd reach a utter standstill because of dissertation, but it seems like I'm on the right path. I seem to really know where I'm going. Okay, so this is going to be one big block. Although I am writing some written evaluations that are a bit more formal, because I've realised, although I've been liking doing these video blogs, they have become quite informal, and I have basically just been chatting and I haven't been treating them like a presentation like I should have been. So to start off with, I'm going to talk about the artists I've been studying in my dissertation, because I actually want to talk about their relevance within my current practice, because it's all kind of changed a bit since I started off writing, because my practice has become a lot more focused than it was last year. I think last year I was working with language, and I think I do work with language, but not quite in such an explicit way. Like before, I wanted to only use language as my way of presenting something. But now I feel, although I can do that, and I think there will be instances where I do that, I don't want it to be the exclusive thing that I do. I think there's so many components to everything I do, and I don't think it does to pigeonhole myself. I think I have a certain style that I should be sticking to, and I should stick to my guns and stop second guessing myself. But I do feel I don't need to pigeonhole myself just using language. And I think language is also just an important part of my life. Like, I've been reading more poetry and looking at various things like fonts and stuff like that, and writing a lot for the development of my work. But this term, and obviously for the rest of the year now, it's not going to be, I imagine, a main player in the visual aspect of my work. So you'd think my artists, which I've been studying, John Baldessari, Lawrence Weiner and Robert Barry, become a bit moot. You'd be like, okay, so you've done these artists, how are they relevant to your practice? First and foremost, actually, Robert Barry has been a bit of a game changer, actually, for the way I approach my work. Like, okay, you'd think I'm studying his stuff, or I was studying his stuff now. I was studying his stuff from 1969, and that stuff was really extreme, really radical, conceptual art, and not in a lot of ways considered language art. But I did consider it language art, because things like telepathic piece, where he was trying to telepathically communicate with the audience, I think there is the element of the work only exists in the language, in what he's trying to communicate, the thought he's trying to communicate, and the fact that the only reason the viewer knows what's going on is from a written piece in the catalogue. And I think most people would say, most non-traditional artists would consider that the performance aspect of it was the art. And I think that's perfectly valid and fine, and to some extent I do agree, but I've just been approaching it from this angle, and I have come to be quite comfortable with this angle. And even things like as other pieces, like Radio Wave piece, the only reason that people know about it is from being told through words. Otherwise they exist but nobody knows. And this is where I begin to fall into a spiralling hole of, why does anyone need to know? Can't it just exist without anyone knowing? Can it just exist in your head? This is where I get a bit lost, and I'm like, why am I making art? I may as well just think about it. It's all art anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I don't go so far down there. But Robert Barry, in particular, has made me think that I spend a lot of time thinking, but is it art? Could it be considered art? Are other people going to be like, Then I'm like, think about this guy. He was pushing the boundaries beyond. He was making work that was basically completely invisible. So what if what I make is not considered art by some people? That has been one of the main things I've got from Robert Barry I feel pretty inspired. I've also been looking at some of his later work. I keep being very unprepared for these videos and not writing names down of things, but he did a piece, which I should just Google actually. He did a piece of work and it was a box with some writing in it. That's very vague. I think it's called Something in a Box. Yes, it is. Something in a Box. I do hope none of the tutors watched this video. Robert Barry, Something in a Box. 62 statements on index cards in a walnut wood box. Each card proposes a different statement by Barry, 62 statements altogether. The first one introduces the following, something that, and then 61 statements that are supposed to define something, the essence of which remains irrevocably unknown. Now this does interesting things with language, and you can see why his later work is actually a lot more relevant to me, kind of because I'm not going to be making work without physical presence for a start. And I would say my work is very visibly similar, but then I saw this work and it made me really inspired. So in one of my previous videos I think I mentioned that I was doing some writing that I'm not particularly keen on and definitely needs some work done to it. That I was writing memories but redacting my sister out of it, and I was thinking about making a box to put them all in, and kind of the idea, the obvious thing is that obviously like box, brain, memories in the box, blah blah. And then the other idea would be like a memory box, you know, people often keep keepsakes and stuff. And I thought that would be quite a neat idea. My main problem with this, and it would be obviously heavily inspired and a bit of an homage to Robert Barry, who I actually have come to really like. I mean, I went into the essay dreading thinking about him. I was so comfortable with John Baldessari. I'm pretty comfortable with Lawrence Weiner. I looked at their work, I loved it. Robert Barry, and I was like, that guy's nuts, what's he doing? And then I have come out of it being a bit of a Robert Barry fan, to be honest. I'm being pretty inspired by how daring he could be, and then later I think his work is just my kind of stuff and I really like it. So the main thing, and I discussed this idea of the redacted memories with Neil, my main problem is my writing, and this is the thing that I get a bit confused with, in that I don't know to what extent I should be focusing on my writing and to what extent I should be focusing on the more visual aspects of my work. But he said I should try and write it so she's out of the memory, but it's not explicitly said, but you just have this feeling that something's wrong. And this is like in George Perek's, the one he wrote without the E in it. So it wasn't specifically said anywhere, but you read it and it would have like no real plot. And you'd have to see, oh wait, there's no E's in there. So yeah, that's Robert Barry, that's basically kind of what I've got from him. I mean, he's made a lot of work that I really like, and I've mostly found that I'd feel very inspired to be a bit more daring with my work, and not care as much about whether it or not it is art in the traditional sense, and if it, I don't know, I think it's partially because it's my final year as well, and I've realised there are so many people on this course that I'm never going to see again, so why should I care what they think? I've spent a lot of time not following my gut and trying to stick to what other people want me to do. And when I was 17, 18, I used to basically do whatever I wanted, and I was constantly encouraged. And I stopped getting encouraged and I stopped doing what I wanted. And I've kind of come to realise I need to just start doing what I want to do, because a lot of the time it does really work out and it looks good, and I just need to start following my gut really and just doing whatever the hell I want and being like, whatever, to everyone else. So yeah, John Baldessari, he was actually a lot more relevant to me last year, and I knew a lot about him before coming into this year and doing my dissertation on him, but I think, so I don't really want to talk about him too much, to be honest, because weirdly I thought he would be the most beneficial to me, but he's actually not, because I've looked at his work just a bit too much, and it's one of those things when you overanalyze it, and it kind of stops being so inspiring to me. When I first saw it, first started engaging with his work, I was amazed and I thought he was the best. Literally, I was like, nobody's better than this guy. And now, I don't know, I feel like I've just looked at it too much, but it might be just because of this dissertation thing. And I think there are definitely arguments to be had around his work. The arguments I was using in my dissertation was that of how have I already forgotten? I literally handed this in like 2 days ago. I've gone brain dead. Well, never mind. That's really embarrassing. But yeah, all the stuff I've been looking at towards him, I have found it quite interesting to discuss, and interesting to think about my work in relation to the theories that they use. John Baldessari, Lawrence Weiner and Robert Barry, all these conceptual ideas and all these breaking of boundaries of traditional values. And I think one of the things about John Baldessari, and this is what I was discussing, is that he used the tradition, kept these traditions and was questioning them simultaneously. So he was kind of, he was, without completely doing a Robert Barry and just being like, no, because Robert Barry was basically just like, if I'm going to break these rules, I'm going to break these rules, and just smashed all tradition forever. Whereas John Baldessari used the tradition to question it and kind of poke fun at it a bit. Like, the first time I saw it, I saw these paintings and I was like, why is he using a painting? If it's conceptual art and he's breaking these traditions, a painting is this commodity that can be bought, and it represents capitalism, and it represents everything that they thought was wrong with the art market. It's a buyable thing. The whole point was everyone was making things that could not be bought or were not traditionally aesthetically pleasing. Whereas you look at his work, and aside from the fact that it's text, and that's a funny one because although I can read about what people felt about it, I know I'm reading from artist-written books, so I kind of don't know how shocking it was considered at the time, like in reality. So obviously it's language as a painting, and first of all you're like, what? That's not very usual. But then it's still aesthetically pleasing to me through font, black and white, or cream and black, and it's still a buyable thing that you can hang on a wall and you can put in a gallery, so it still props up this capitalist gallery. However, I think it's the actual content of the writing that kind of it's kind of like it's a bit meta, making fun of itself kind of thing. I'm trying to remember the specifics of them, but they're kind of mocking the art institutions and the art market and all that, and it's kind of self-referential. And I think this kind of shows what you can really do with language, but it also shows that you don't really need to throw everything in the trash and just be like, go like radical. You can do something that's equally as questioning, but not quite as out there, and it's a bit more subtle. And I think I prefer that. I really like Robert Barry's later work, I do, but his 1969 stuff, as interesting it is to talk about, and I don't know whether it's meant to be liked. I don't think it is meant to be liked, but I don't really like it. Yeah, I get the impression it's not meant to be liked at all, actually. I get the impression it's meant to be something that exists to question tradition. But for that reason, I find it hard to engage with it on an artistic level other than to feel inspired to be like, fuck the norms and all that kind of thing. John Baldessari is a lot more up my street, and I think he's very subtle, and I think that's what I like about him. In that he's quite funny, really. He kind of jokes about the society, the institutions, the capitalist societies that make money off all this, whatever, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I think he's got quite an interesting approach to it. And a lot of people did not consider him... No, a lot of people do consider him a conceptual artist. Other conceptual artists didn't seem to consider him as a conceptual artist, which is quite funny in itself, to be honest, because I consider him as a conceptual artist, and every book I read about him, he's considered one. But then when you look at other people like Joseph Kosuth, they're just like, nah, he's not though. yeah. So yeah, that's John Baldessari, and I think his relevance to my work has literally just been in just how to approach things in a more subtle way, and I have felt that his work is just really beneficial to me, just to, as I said, the thought process, how you think about approaching things. I felt inspired by Robert Barry to just be like, whatever, but I also feel like I don't have to be quite as radical as I think I need to be. I think sometimes with the current art schools, there seems to be a lot of pressure to be as wacky and radical as possible. There seems to be, like, I know people at Central St Martin's, and it's all such a competitive environment, and you'll have to be as bonkers as you can be, and that's basically how it is. But John Baldessari is one of those people who kind of shows that alongside people like Robert Barry, you can still hold your own whilst keeping traditional values and kind of flipping them on their head a bit. He really undermined what was going on. And yeah, I think it's definitely, I would probably say he's one of my most favoured artists, and that's not just for his language stuff, but for his photography stuff as well, which I really like. But that's kind of a separate point, and it's different kind of era. And you have the whole part when he burned all his paintings. That was always quite like, that's quite fun, and I love all that symbolism and whatnot. Last thing I'm going to talk about Lawrence Weiner. He has been, to be honest, the least involved with my work, simply because I thought he was a lot more inspirational to me than he actually has ended up being. To me, he kind of is what he is, and that sounds pretty naive, because obviously he's a great artist, obviously, and he's obviously so smart, and his work is great. Like, Statements is just so important. But I've also found that, I think it might just be because I was only really studying Statements, because I didn't want to take on too much. So I only took on that, and then these are quite instructional by nature. Obviously, I've not taken that stance at all. Like, there was a point at the start of the year when I was thinking about using the idea of sisters, making it more universal, writing instructions to sisters to do things, have it more of an interactive, participating piece. But then I realised I only care about me, so why would I bother asking about other people? Haha. So yeah, I guess the instructional nature of his work just doesn't fit with mine. However, there are certain pieces of his work which I find the imagery is really important, and it's really nice. Like, I think there are certain ones, like his ones which along the lines of nail plywood to the wall, and that's kind of it, really. I find those quite uninspiring. I realise that there are social connotations of plywood and the processes of the time that revolved around these kind of materials. I get that, but I just don't find it as inspiring as Robert Barry's work. Like, there are ones which light a flare, things, the ones with strong imagery in your head, and it kind of creates that idea that you really don't need to physically see the work, because it can exist in your head, and it's when it's written and it creates this image. On the one hand, each image is going to be different to every person. Obviously, nobody's going to picture everything exactly the same. But on the other hand, it's in its purest form, and it's in the form you want it to be. Because, I mean, everyone knows, or I know, when you think of how you want something to be, and you try and make it 9.999 times out of 10, it won't be how you thought it was going to be originally. And I think he brings it down to its neatest form. It's like the nucleus of the work. Do you need the rest? No. And although I don't think I am going to be stripping my work down completely to language, this is something that really has interested me before. And I don't think it's something that frightens me. Like, when I think about writing memories, I think that in some way these could exist as a piece of artwork by themselves. Do they need a physical component in the sense of one that isn't language based. And you think maybe it doesn't, and maybe this is the direction that my art can take, you know? I mean, as I said, because of the instructional nature of the work, I have been a bit like more distanced from him, or I became more distanced from him, but I do think the way that he breaks the boundaries of the gallery space is also something that I quite have found to be quite inspirational, especially since I've been more active on social media with my artwork. It's like a gallery feel work that isn't in a gallery. Obviously, I would not be the kind of artist who'd say, no, you can't have my work, you capitalist pigs, because I would happily take some money. But, you know, I appreciate the sentiment, and obviously I think these guys were living in a completely different era than I'm living in now. I think maybe it isn't that different now I think about it. I'm thinking of all these horrible capitalist things, and I think I can't realistically claim that I don't live in a capitalist society right now. I don't know. That one bears some thought. But I do feel like when you think about this era in the 60s, you think about the booming, like, advertising era of America, which isn't the same as it is now, I would imagine. I wasn't there, I don't know. So I have ended up babbling a bit on this, but I kind of just wanted to vocalise the links between these artists and my work, because I was beginning to become a bit distanced from them as my work began to exist in something that wasn't entirely rooted in language. Although I think language is still really important in my work, and it has been really important just in my life more now. I found that the reintroduction of language has kind of made me take a lot more of it's allowed me to be personal with my work, but in less a kind of isolating way. And I think it allows me to, tackle the thoughts, experiences, memories that I want to tackle without creating something that's fraught with the tension of exposing myself, and just without isolating the viewer, because you are reading somebody's personal thoughts, and that can be quite isolating because you are quite like, this is somebody's personal thoughts. So you see, there are so many different things you can do with language that you think you can deal with personal ideas, but not in this way. But language has allowed me to do this. So it's allowed me to kind of free myself up to make physical work that isn't so conflicted. So I still think language is a really important part of my work. Definitely. Writing is just, I've been keeping a diary now, which has become quite important to me. I definitely think it's something that I'm going to continue doing. Just, it's not the main focus point of my work right now. But I am stressing that these artists are still very important to me in my work, especially Robert Barry, who knew, but he's been great to research, and it's been great to see something that wasn't quite what I was, not the thing that you would expect me to be looking at, not the obvious thing, because there were Lawrence Weiner, John Baldessari, language artists, but then Robert Barry is a language artist, and he's so radical and out there, so it was really interesting to look at, to be honest. And it definitely has benefited my practical work, like, immeasurably, to be honest. I have maybe not the physical outcome, but it's definitely allowed me to tackle things in a different way now.